There are many myths and legends of the Old West, but none of them are quite like Mary Fields. She stood nearly 6 feet tall, she carried a revolver, she smoked cigars, drank whiskey, and fought men that were bigger than her. And when the US government needed someone they could trust to deliver the mail through blizzards, wolves, and armed bandits, they turned to her. Today, we're going to be discussing the legend that is Mary Fields, also known as. Not much is really known about her younger life, there's just no record of it. And honestly, that tells you a lot about what you need to know about the times. See, enslaved people were not afforded any records, they were not even afforded any history. But that all changed after the Civil War. Now, when slavery was abolished in 1865, Mary was already in her 30s, already a fully grown woman that was already hardened by life. And this newfound freedom didn't actually afford Mary any comfort. It actually came with a lot of uncertainty. Now, she was able to find work as a servant on the riverboats that go along the Mississippi at the time. Now, this was hard work, heavy lifting, and grueling hours. But Mary, she was basically built for it. She was strong, physically powerful, and refused to make herself small just so others could feel bigger about themselves. Eventually, her path crossed a Catholic convent, and there she befriended a nun by the name of Mother Amadeus Dunn. And this is a person that would completely change the trajectory of Mary's life. When Mother Amadeus was assigned to a mission in the Montana Territory, unfortunately, she had fallen ill. And when Mary got word that her friend was sick, she dropped everything and headed to Montana to help Mother Amadeus. And that's how a formerly enslaved black woman ended up in one of the harshest, whitest, most unforgiving frontiers in America. Now, Montana in the 1880s was a brutal landscape. Blizzards could kill you overnight, wild animals roamed freely, groups of armed bandits awaited any weary travelers caught on the road at the wrong time. And not to mention that racism in the area was open and violent. Mary started working at St. Peter's Mission in Cascade, Montana. No, Mary actually did all of the jobs that no one else really even wanted. She hauled freight, she repaired the buildings, tended to the livestock, basically about as hard of manual labor as you could get at the time. And Mary was actually also known to have a temper. Now, it was widely known that Mary carried a .38 revolver, but had no problem putting it down and just throwing fisticuffs with whoever dared to challenge her. There are records of her getting into different gunfights. I mean, one story claims that she knocked a man clean out with one punch after he dared to insult her. So Mary was about as tough as they come at the time. I mean, she drank, she smoked, she swore, and the nuns at the convent actually loved Mary, and they really loved her loyalty to St. Peter's Mission. But the other Catholic officials did not like anything about the stories that they would hear of Mary's exploits. And eventually, after a confrontation with another hired hand actually resulted in guns being drawn, Mary was actually asked to leave the mission. So, at nearly 60 years old, Mary had to start over again. In 1895, Mary put in an application to be a mail carrier for the United States Postal Service. More specifically, she applied to be a star route mail carrier. Star route carriers had to deliver mail to the most remote locations. They had to repair their own wagons, They had to travel through snowstorms, protect the mail from armed thieves, and survive completely alone in the wilderness. At around 60 years old, Mary became the first black female mail carrier in United States history. She drove a horse-drawn wagon through the wilderness of Montana, even sometimes having to walk miles in the snow when the drifts would block off the road. If wolves circled her wagon, she would shoot at them. If armed bandits tried to rob her wagon, well, honestly, the armed bandits knew better. She had already solidified a reputation as someone who had no problem getting in a shootout, let alone putting fist and feet on a grown-ass man. Mary stayed with her revolver and her rifle, and everyone in the town of Cascade, Montana knew this. Word around town, don't dare mess with Stagecoach Mary. One winter, her wagon actually overturned in the middle of a blizzard, and rather than abandoning the mail, Mary just picked up the bags, threw them over her shoulder, and walked the rest of the route. Mail got delivered every single time when it came to Stagecoach Mary. In all of her 8 years of being a mail carrier, she had never missed a delivery. Not a single time. Now, Mary actually became a living legend in the town of Cascade. White townsfolk who discriminated against other black residents treated Mary different from them. And that was not because all of a sudden prejudice had disappeared when Mary walked in a room. That was because Mary demanded respect from everyone. Man, woman, black, white, did not matter. You were going to respect Mary Field. The children in town adored Mary. There's even records of Mary breaking up bar fights by lifting both men into the air by their collar with one arm each. When Montana passed laws banning women from entering saloons, there was basically a local exception for Stagecoach Mary. And that's how much they respected her. She was trusted, feared, loved by everyone in town. And in an era where black women were systematically denied dignity, Mary carved hers out with grit and pure force of will. Mary retired in 1903, and she had delivered more mail than men that were half her age. In her later years, she opened up a laundry service and babysat local children. And when she passed in 1914 at around the age of 82, all the schools in Cascade, Montana were shut down for Mary's funeral. Think about that. A formerly enslaved black woman getting honored in such a way in 1900s Montana. Her funeral was one of the largest that the town had ever seen. I mean, Mary was buried with the utmost respect. And I think that's very important to note. I believe Stagecoach Mary's story is important because it definitely helps change the narrative of what traditionally we're told about the American Old West. It wasn't just cowboys, bandits, and shootouts. It was filled with immigrants. It had a lot of black pioneers. And I think we could all do well to know that and to take note of it. Now, Mary Fields did not wait for permission to exist. She didn't ask to be accepted. She didn't soften herself to survive. She carried a gun, she delivered the mail, and she carved out a legacy that could not be denied. And in a country that once enslaved her, she became a federal employee in charge of something that at the time was very sacred, and that's the mail. And she was not hired as a symbol. She wasn't hired as a token. She was hired as the best person to fulfill the job. And I think her 8 years of service completely proves that. That's Stagecoach Mary. Not a myth, not an exaggeration. A real woman who lived a longer, harder life than most legends of that time could even dream of. But if you're still here, that brings us to the end of the video. If you enjoyed anything about that, please hit like on my videos. And if you want to see more stories of these legendary figures in American history, then maybe consider subscribing to the channel and check out one of our other videos. That'll be around here somewhere, I'm assuming here. But as always, I've been Mike, you've been you, and together I think we can all be a little better. And as always, just do right. It's only right. Peace.